for joining me for the Plant Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Howie Jacobson. It's hard enough for you to change your diet or your lifestyle to become healthier all by yourself. But if you're part of a relationship, it can get even more complicated. That's why I wanted to talk to today's guest, Dr. Susan Orenstein, who's a clinical psychologist, couples therapist, and longtime friend. She's been on the podcast before, episode 217, where we talked about creating a safe couple bubble. And today we're looking at kind of the flip side of that. She's got a new podcast called After the First Marriage, which is all about learning from relationships that have ended. She points out that if we don't take stock, do postmortems, and figure out what we can learn about ourselves from old relationships, we're likely to continue making the same mistakes into the future. And I was specifically interested in how difficult relationships can navigate things like somebody wants to get healthier, or somebody wants their spouse or partner to get healthier. And how do we navigate that without making things worse? So in our conversation, I share some of the typical things that I see in my clients when they're talking about difficulties in their relationships, and Dr. Orenstein helps me brainstorm possible approaches to them. So I hope you enjoy. Without further ado, Dr. Susan Orenstein, welcome back to the Plant Yourself podcast.
It's been a while, but I'm so delighted to be here, Howie. Thank you.
Yeah, let's it's the end of 2020, so let's talk about divorce.
Okay.
Let's go out. Let's go out on a happy note.
Other happy topics, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for some people, divorce actually is a happy topic.
It can be, yes.
Right. So, our interest in this was we've been chatting about sort of the interplay between the people that I work with who sometimes get better, like they start improving their health and they realize that they've been putting up with things that they don't want to put up with. They want, a new relationship, a fresh start, or in some cases, as you said, like their partner might be healthy and they're feeling bad about themselves and they pull away and so let's, before we get into kind of my interests around health and well-being, so you have a new podcast, right? That's all of it. So tell us about the podcast and how you have sort of transitioned your career into this topic, because you've been doing other stuff before this, right?
Sure. So the name of my podcast is After the First Marriage. I'm a psychologist in private practice, and I've been working with individuals and couples around relationship issues the whole time for over 20 years. And I've noticed over the years, some of my very favorite clients have been people who are going through a divorce and just can't hold their head up. They feel so miserable. And then through the course of their own hard work and some support and guidance by me and other resources, I get to see them blossom. And so I just love working with these people after the first marriage, so they have a better chance for happiness in the future.
So, but to focus specifically on divorce is, I work with relationships. It's almost like some part of my brain goes, oh, I work with like relationships that don't work, right?
Well, it's very interesting, Howie, because after the first marriage, I help people with divorce to do a post-mortem on their first marriage so that their second marriage will stick. So it's actually, in helping people with divorce, I feel like I'm helping them be very proactive about their future and giving them a better chance for happiness. Because as we know, second marriages, third marriages, the incidence of divorce increases. So generally, left to people's own devices, they don't learn, they don't process the divorce, and they end up in another marriage that has a higher incidence of divorce. So it actually, I am pro-relationship, pro-marriage, and sometimes a really good divorce can help set people up for a good marriage in their future. I know it sounds strange.
Well, I mean, to me, it sounds just like, oh, I made a mistake. I ate the wrong thing, or I forgot, I didn't do my workout and I'm paying a price for it. And can I learn from that? Or am I going to spiral into, I just ate an Oreo cookie, so now I'm going to polish off the whole sleeve and maybe the entire box. I guess, it's almost like like once you've eaten the first cookie, it's really easy to eat the others. And I'm always like, once you've gotten a divorce, like there's probably more stigma and resistance to a first divorce. And like once you've done it, you're like, oh, like maybe, you know,
Already
this is
broken the taboo.
yeah, like
Yeah.
all right, second, third, fourth. But it's interesting to think of it in terms of not having learned the lessons.
Mm-hmm.
So like when someone is divorced without your help or like on their own, what are the wrong lessons that people learn from a failed marriage? And I don't even know if a failed marriage is the right word or a marriage that they've terminated.
Right. Great question. What are the wrong lessons? The wrong lessons are often singularly focused. Either it's all his or her fault, or it's all my fault. I wasn't good enough. I screw this up. I'm such a terrible person. I wasn't worthy, or like what I was saying before, or that SOB, she did this, he did this. I think the answer for most people is somewhere in the relationship. And I think people don't generally think in relational terms. So what I help people think about is, what did we as a couple do wrong? What lessons did we not absorb? What did we not even know about? Maybe we didn't even know that we could be a two-person system. That wasn't even on our radar screen. So I teach people what that means to be a two-person system and how to create a successful, secure, functioning relationship. And I'm using attachment terms. We might talk about that later. Some of your listeners might know about that.
Well, can we talk about it now?
We can.
Great. So what do you mean by attachment
Okay, so this is really juicy stuff. So in childhood, there are a lot of theorists and researchers who have talked about childhood attachment, how a child attaches to their primary caregiver. And when a child is what we call securely attached, then they know that that their caregiver is going to be attuned to their needs. Not 100% attuned, but more attuned than less, to be able to respond to them when they cry, to be able to give them support, to give them comfort, and to be reliable, to be there. And again, not to always get it right. So if you think about a mother hears the baby cry, goes and feeds the baby, attempts to, and the baby keeps crying. So she didn't get it right the first time, but a caring, supportive mother will then try to do something else and keep trying. And so the baby learns that the world is safe, that there are friendly people out there that are going to be there for them, and again, not perfectly, but be there for them.
And it sounds like by be there for them, you mean like in active communication. Like, yes. Even if I'm not getting it right, baby can tell I'm like there, I'm trying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Right. That I see you, that I hear you, that I care about you, that you matter to me.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, I would think that the percentage of parents who don't try to do that is exceedingly low, right? But the number of children who are brought up without secure attachment is pretty high. So right. where's the gap?
It's very interesting and intriguing. So the research tells us that about 50% of children grow up with developing a secure attachment, meaning they grew up having a caregiver that was there, that was good enough. So the other 50%, it wouldn't necessarily be because the parent didn't try. It could be the parent was preoccupied with having like poverty, had 2 jobs to go to, and or maybe their own illness or their own addiction. Maybe there was some kind of abuse. Maybe it doesn't have to be 100% because of the parent. It could be a child who has a lot of illnesses, maybe has been hospitalized a lot as a child and has a hard time developing that secure attachment because of the trauma outside of the parent relationship. So it's not always because there's the mother-child. It can be a little more complex than that. But we know about 50% of the population grows up with secure functioning attachment, which I think is pretty good or pretty bad. Mm-hmm. It's 50%. It's both.
Yeah, I wonder if that divides on party lines for national elections.
It may be, I don't know.
Well, let's leave that there.
Yes.
So how do you know, like, so let's say you're not in a clinical setting, you're just, walking down the street at a party, talking to people. Are there hints about whether someone was securely attached as a child, or can we kind of camouflage it?
Well, there are other attachment styles besides secure functioning. There are a few other ones, and people can read about this if they want. Diane Poole Heller wrote a really good book about attachment. There's a book, I think it's by Amir Levine, called Attached. So there's some really good books for lay people that talk about other kinds of attachment. And the two broad camps, if I can use broad brushstrokes, would be people who really seek comfort through themselves. They don't reach out for support. They kind of have the mindset of, I'm going to do it myself. Maybe we could think of them as they value independence. It could be well, when you bring up politics, it could be the Declaration of Independence, this idea that America is this place where we can pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and just one person can do that. And Diane Poole Heller said, really, she thinks we should call it the Declaration of Interdependence, because that would be so much healthier. So there's a group of people who really believes in this independence, and they're quick to dismiss their own feelings. They're quick to dismiss other people's feelings. They want other people to like grin and bear it, pull themselves up by the bootstraps. They're not big lovers of feelings. And then there's another camp, and they really seek comfort from other people. They might do it to the extent where it seems clingy, or it could seem whiny or naggy or negative. Because those people can be really, when they don't get their needs met, and you think of a baby not getting their needs met, they would just protest a lot. And their protests often worked. So they've been trained in a young age to speak up, to protest. But they're used to sometimes getting what they want, sometimes they don't. So I think you asked it like at a cocktail party, how would we know who's whom? That might be a good parlor game, but I don't know.
Well, and I imagine it's fairly unpredictable with like what kind of parenting produces what kind of reaction. Like, if I'm not getting my needs met as a small child, one way I could flip into becoming really extra clingy and trying to get them met by, the mailman, everybody. Or I could say, well, I'm on my own here.
Yes.
No one's going to come. No one's going to so it's I'm imagining it's some sort of combination of environment and a person's innate characteristics.
That's right. And it's just it's a brilliant coping strategy for children, because they figure out a way of the world that they can manage, that makes sense to them. The problem is when they become an adult, it can lead to tumultuous relationships. So the good news, Howie, is that whatever attachment style you were raised with, you can learn secure attachment, and you can create a secure attachment in your intimate partner relationship. Wherever you start, you can still get there.
Gotcha. So is divorce essentially an issue of the 50% who aren't securely attached?
I think that is a really good question. I don't think it's that simple. I don't think we have data on that to know, but I know I've seen secure functioning partners in my practice, and they could still have some problems. They could have, so they could grow up feeling secure, learning how to comfort each other, learning how to be in a healthy relationship with someone, but there might be deal breakers that they just come to when they come to later in their marriage, or maybe one of them wants kids and the other one doesn't, or maybe one gets an opportunity for some job overseas and the other person has never wanted that. And so there are other reasons people get divorced that could be, not really because of personality, but because of incompatibility.
Gotcha. But it sounds like those aren't the people who need a lot of help doing postmortems. Like, I refuse to move to Venezuela. Like, okay, next time pick someone who's not likely.
Yes, that's right. That's
Right. Okay, so if we have these attachment styles, and so we're presumably mostly unaware of them. We think whatever we're doing in our experiences is normal, and so we then like laser in on people who match our style or remind us of our parent or remind us of the opposite of our parent. Like, what's the cybernetic of attraction that gets us into trouble?
Well, oftentimes we seek what's familiar. So it's really not uncommon at all when I will meet with a couple and they'll each have like a sibling 5 years younger who had a serious illness when they were children, or they'll each have a parent that became sick or addicted to something when they were 12. So I think there's this familiarity that people have, and that they can see each other, and that helps them feel connected. So, but you can see the people who are more, I can do it myself, the independent, sometimes they get together, sometimes the more codependents get together, and sometimes there's a mixture. So it can come in any kind of flavor. Yeah.
Okay. But I'm imagining, like, at first it seems like the other person is the solution to some kind of problem. Like, if I'm clingy and I've chased people away my whole life, and then I meet someone as clingy as me, and I go, great, they'll never abandon me. Right. Like, I remember like listening to Gabor Mate talking about like the issue of addiction. And he said, if addiction were about the thing you were doing, then sex addicts would be fine because they would just find each other.
Oh.
Right. So it's obviously that somehow that the thing you think is going to solve the problem doesn't solve the problem. But is that kind of how it works, that you say, well, this person is going to meet my insatiable need for X?
Yes, but I don't think it's really conscious. And it's so interesting because the first year when we get in that love haze and we fall in love, there's so many chemicals going on. And so a lot of times there's a lot of sexual chemistry. And so it's really interesting how people pick people. So I think some of it's familiarity. Some of it might be, I'm going to pick the wound, so that in a great marriage, people can heal together with they'll each have their own wounds that fit just right, so they can do the work together.
Well, that to me sounds like the crux of it, that there's no perfect marriage. There's no marriage where perfect people are coming in completely unwounded. And the marriage is either going to be a dance of healing or a dance of destruction, or a sort of long drawn out detente until death. Beautifully
put. And I think you're right. Everyone comes from baggage. And so my mentor, Stan Tatkin, says there's no such thing as a low maintenance person. That that everyone's high maintenance. You just need to choose which high maintenance you get. And
I faked it really well, though. I had a low maintenance disguise on for many years.
That's true. And I've also heard, like, with affair partners or long distance partners like that, that through lust, like from afar, things look a certain way, but then up close, that's where you can see the real work.
Right. Well, I guess I love this phrase, the love haze brought about by chemistry, that it kind of covers everything. Right. That's like a really good French sauce. It doesn't matter like what kind of crap you have underneath. The first bunch of bites are going to be yummy, rich and flavorful.
That's
like
right.
Is that part of the issue, that then so a divorced person will then meet someone else and all of a sudden, oh my God, this is what I've been missing. Like, this person is so wonderful. That person was so terrible. Like, I've solved my problems because I'm so, like, this is the one.
So I think, are you talking about you're in a marriage and then somebody else looks attractive? Is that what?
Well, I said like after divorce.
Oh, I see.
Like, so the person you see is somehow in either real or superficial ways different.
Absolutely.
And you're attracted to them. And so all of a sudden it's like, the problem with my last marriage was them, and now I've solved it.
Yes. So I think there was some research showing when women have their second marriage, they go for someone exactly opposite of their first partner. And for men, it could be anything. I don't know why that is, but I think in the first year or two of dating, with your first marriage or your second marriage or your third, fourth, fifth, there's that love haze and there's this illusionment, and it takes a year or two for the disillusionment to happen. And so I think that's when people need to decide if they're compatible for each other, when the sauce is gone.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I guess, that when you say illusionment, then the opposite of that, of course, is disillusionment, which has a negative connotation. But when I think about the word, it's pretty positive. Like, I no longer have illusions. Like, I'm looking at reality.
That's true.
Like there's an opportunity there.
That's true.
So how do we post-mortem in relational terms? And are you typically working with the divorced couple, or with an individual who's licking the wounds of divorce, and they're the only one telling you the story?
Yeah. So both. So sometimes I work with couples and there's some betrayal, like an affair. And in a way, that's a postmortem, because they're going to bury their first marriage and they might stay together and have a second marriage with each other. So I would help people after the first marriage, although they're still legally married, if that makes sense. And then I see just individuals going through divorce, and we do the postmortems. And so I think it's helpful for everybody to really learn, what the heck did I just go through, and how can I make sure to choose wisely, and how can I have the skills I need for intimacy so that I can have a beautiful path forward.
Gosh, I mean, what I'm thinking is, like, everybody I know who works in a company has annual performance reviews. And, you play on a sports team, you have a coach, they'll tell you after every game or every play or every season what you've done wrong and what you can improve. Like it seems to me like I could really, postmortem, sounds really good, after every year, to be able to, whether it's divorce or struggling or loving or not, it seems like it'd be a very useful discipline to try to learn from a relationship.
I think that's right. That's right. And I even tell couples at the end of each day especially when they're coming off of some real difficulties, just to say, how are we doing? How are we? To have conversations about we. Yeah. And so many people are afraid of that. So if you're raised with insecure functioning, you're raised in a system where people didn't have explicit agreements. People weren't sensitive to each other. People didn't make sure things were fair. People were just surviving. And so, I teach people what it means to be in a secure functioning environment where things are transparent, people feel safe, and people feel safe to talk about their relationship and without worrying that they're going to be attacked or judged.
That sounds hard, in that you can set up the rules and people can agree to it, but when they get angry, it's very easy to betray the safety, especially if my partner is being vulnerable in a way that you taught her, not to put too fine a point on it, the way she did not learn as a child, the way she learned from you. And then I take advantage of that vulnerability because I'm really hurt by something she said. How do you build safety into a system that is already built on these ticking time bombs?
So it's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that, because we are not perfect, and we are going to act stupid. We're going to act thoughtless, selfish. We're going to try to protect our own interests. And sometimes we may protect our own interests at the stake of our relationship. And that can really look dangerous to our partners. So we have to be really, really get good at the skill of apologizing, and not an apology like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lie prostrate and say I'm the worst person ever. And it's all about shame. No, it's about, I'm sorry I hurt you. That was insensitive of me. Let me try again. And so just to be able to repair quickly. And because we're all absolutely going to take advantage of each other, and we need to be able to repair that quickly. Yeah.
Do you find that couples compete to be good at this? Like
That's very funny. Probably. I can't think of something that comes to mind, but I mean, sometimes people will maybe they'll say I'm trying and you're not, or something like that. But that's sort of the message too, is that their job as a good partner is to help lift the other one up and to support the other person. So it's always like, if you think about we used to have Derby Day in school, where, the fair where you have the three-legged race. Is it called three-legged race, where the two, your inner leg and their outer leg are tied together. So if somebody is trying to prove their partner wrong to me in a session or in life, then really they're hurting themselves if they're a two-person system. Because if you think about the three-legged race, if your partner's on the ground, it's a lot harder for you to run. You have to help make sure they're standing up and run together.
God, that's a great imagery.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So when people are getting divorced, and if they grew up in a family where their parents were divorced, where their parents didn't understand what a two-person system was like, how would they get that? So a lot of the work that I'm trying to do on my podcast and just to share with individuals is there is such a thing, the declaration of interdependence, where you're better off. There's a synergy. And so 1 + 1 is a lot more than 2.
Yeah. And when you ask that question, like, where would they learn that? Like, where do we learn about relationships outside of our homes? It's sort of through popular culture, right? Through Love Actually movies and pop songs. And I'm trying to think of some realistic ones. They're not popping to mind.
So I like some of the new shows that are messier. I don't know if you've seen. I like some of the British comedies that are really messy, like Catastrophe. Did you ever see that?
No.
It is hysterical, and they can be brutal. And so I'm not recommending that people are. It is a show, and they're really out of line. But what I love about that show is they're really good at repair. They're really good at making up and saying they're sorry and getting back together. And it's a funny show too. But it's not the Photoshop view of relationships. It's gritty. Yeah.
Right. All right. I'll throw in one show that I've been touting to everyone for the past month, called Ted Lasso. I told Rafi about it. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but the subplot of the entire first season is his divorce.
Oh.
And he's a guy who's, fish out of water in a different culture, trying to win them over. And in his job, he's just brilliant. And he's the master psychologist. And yet you see all this in his own life, where he is confused, he's hurt, he's alienated, he's marginalized, and how he struggles to apply all of his psychological brilliance to his own relationship.
That sounds awesome. I definitely want to. I want to look up that one. That sounds fun.
But can I throw in some scenarios of first marriage? Let's say, and this kind of sort of comes from my experience working with people, where typically the woman feels unvalued and she's gained weight. She hasn't lost the childbirth weight. Her husband makes her feel fat. and disgusting. That's the story that she will tell. How, like, I don't know what's going on, don't know him, don't know the relationship, just have this story. If you were working with that woman, what are the lessons that she could draw from her first marriage to be more successful in the next one? Is this an illegal question to ask a therapist because you'd want to actually have her and like?
No. I mean, we can kind of throw around ideas, and yeah, everybody's different. But you're saying that this person gets divorced?
Yeah, divorced. Gotcha. And says, my husband's a pig. He would tell every time I went to eat something, he'd say, "You can eat that," like constantly judging. She feels terrible about herself, is finally out of the relationship, still feels terrible about herself, wants to go on dates and doesn't want to post her picture to Tinder. Right? Like where is healing for her?
Right. That's a really interesting scenario. I would be curious about a few things. One is I would be curious to know if she ever confided in her husband, her first husband, what that felt like. If she ever was, and it would take some vulnerability, but not to say in anger, cut it out, you jerk, but to say, honey, this is something that really hurts me. It's not helpful when you say these things. I would love, if you really want to support me, here's how you can do that. Let's talk about that. And so I'd be curious to know if she could have that conversation with him. And if so was a barrier her being able to feel value herself enough to speak up. So that's part one. And if she could do that, then part two is, did she pick somebody who was sensitive enough and cared enough to listen? And so in the second marriage, or in the dating second go round, I'd want to make sure that she really had a voice to share her feelings with somebody and to find somebody who was sensitive enough that wanted to work with her. And whoever she marries, like we said, everybody's high maintenance. She'd want somebody who could also be vulnerable with her about their issues. Maybe it's not food, but believe me, it's something, so that she could be supporting them. So it would be balanced. Maybe they're a procrastinator, or maybe they have a hard time getting along with people, and she's really good at that. And so that would balance it out. So it's not like she'd pick somebody who's only going to support her. She'd be supporting them as well.
So it's like saying that one of the core lessons of that marriage might be it's shining a spotlight on her need to value herself.
And yes, her need to value herself, and in valuing herself, speaking up for herself, having a voice to her partner.
Yeah, it's almost like the image of like the mama bear protecting her cubs, like being, mothers are famous for being fierce in defense of children, but to view yourself as someone worthy of your protection and acknowledgement and voice. Right.
And that's really good. In a two-person system, you want both people to be strong and to value themselves. You don't win by having a partner who's always going to cave. Like we said, we need both people to get to the finish line and be strong. So she'd be doing not only a favor to herself for standing up for herself, but to her future relationship.
Yeah. Okay, and let's say for the and it could be a woman or a man, but typically what I'm getting statistically is women who come to me with this issue. The woman who's in that marriage but is not thinking about divorce. So would like to hear how to begin to see if this marriage itself is reparable. Would it be just to learn how to confide? To make an offer of vulnerability?
Yes. And that is knowing whether your partner's trustworthy or not. So I wouldn't want someone to put themselves in that situation and be shamed or judged and then to keep doing that. So I want people to protect themselves. But if you're not sure, then it would take a risk of who am I married to and can I be vulnerable or not? So maybe in this case, her partner had a little more to give if he or she was more aware of what was going on. The other thing I'd be curious about, Howie, and is how that impacts their intimacy, and not only their emotional intimacy, but their sex life. So I'd be curious about how satisfied she is, how satisfied the partner is. Do body image issues get in the way? Sometimes a partner can get upset about somebody else being overweight, not maybe because it is the overweight piece and the aesthetic piece, but often it's because they feel that their person is inhibited and doesn't feel good about themselves. So there could be a conversation where her partner would really want her to develop some self-confidence, and maybe there's some ways that they could shake up their sex life in different ways that would be comfortable knowing she has body image issues. There's all kinds of things people can talk about and do.
Okay. Yeah, and that's one area as a health coach I don't really touch on with people. So I'm imagining what they would say if I said, "So, how's your sex life?" But I don't do it.
Yeah.
Well, let's take the other another common thing that comes to me is that one of the partners is the other one is like really upset with their spouse for being unhealthy, for making bad choices all the time. And let's say it's not simply aesthetics, but I care about them. I hate to think, they're on 2 diabetes meds. They're still eating like shit. Whenever I say anything or try to be helpful, they get hurt. So I just clam up, and they still feel judged when they eat something, even if I'm trying my hardest not to say anything. What are the lessons from that angle?
And that is when people are still in that marriage.
Either in, or I'm out and I'm looking for the next one.
Yes.
Right. So whatever second marriage it happens to be.
Yeah. So I think knowing our limits. So sometimes there does have to be some acceptance. Like, here's what I think it's kind of the 12-step motto, or the serenity prayer, which is, let me know what I can change and what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it could be, okay, this is my partner's decision, and we've had these conversations. They know that I'm offering to be supportive, and there's really nothing else. Then I think acceptance would be what's left. And if somebody can't have that acceptance, sometimes that is a deal breaker. So for instance, it's not uncommon for people who maybe their partner is doing something that they just can't live with anymore, like some kind of substance abuse or addictions. Maybe it is or an unhealthy lifestyle. If that's your deal breaker, then that could be, I can't stay in a marriage with this person, or I can't continue in a relationship. That can't be my second husband or my second wife, because they're not valuing, or they're not prioritizing their physical health the way I need them to. And that seems very valid to me.
Yeah. And I love that word valid, because I think people don't feel valid in having deal breakers. Like, it feels petty or selfish or, superficial. Right. Like, to admit, because there's such a complicated conversation in this country around body image. Right. And about fat shaming and what's acceptable in body positivity. So it's almost like, I think there are people who internalize guilt around preferring a certain body type.
Right.
Especially if their spouse had that body type and no longer has it.
Right.
Right. Like a bait and switch. Like, hey, you were so much hotter 20 years ago.
Right. Well, you also said 20 years ago. So it's complicated in a way, because we're all aging too. And maybe our sexual preferences might need to evolve also. So in some ways, yes, it is valid. It is valid to have your sort of template, your erotic template. And as we age and as people's bodies change, we might want to see if there are other ways that we can get turned on or expand our arousal template. So I think both are true. Yes, it's valid. And yes, maybe we can expand our template. It just depends. And
Right.
I can't judge anybody for either of those.
Yeah. And I imagine, though, that most of the time, as we age and our partners age, if the rest of the relationship is going well, like we can be more in love with, a saggy 55-year-old body than, the hot 24-year-old body. It's not like the physical is like, the physical is a symptom.
Right.
Our physical erotic attachment is a symptom of the emotional relationship as opposed to the cause of it.
Right. And I joke with my husband that it's a good thing we're both losing our vision a little bit. So then we can't see all the wrinkles,
Yeah. Right. We're all wearing age goggles now.
That's right. But these are complicated, nuanced things. I think so.
Yeah. So what are some other, I'm bringing you things like from my clinical experience as a coach. What are some other things you see that would be really useful to my listeners who are in relationship, whether they're in a good relationship that they want to make better, or thinking of getting a divorce, or divorced and trying not to make the second or third mistake?
Right.
What are some sort of general issues? Maybe things you bring up in your podcast after the first marriage.
Well, I'm actually my mind went back to what we were talking about somebody who might be very critical of their partner and their eating. And I was saying, give them the benefit of the doubt, speak up, see if they're more sensitive than you think they are. Now I'm kind of thinking the opposite scenario just for a second. And I'm thinking, if you are with somebody who's very critical and judgmental and lacking sensitivity, really is about always prioritizing themselves over you, maybe some gaslighting, that's really dangerous for your mental health and physical health. So if you're in a marriage like that, or you're dating somebody like that, just be careful and get some counseling to make sure that you are valuing yourself. So we want to make sure that people aren't being abused. And this passive aggressiveness, I'm not sure if people call it passive aggression or passive aggressiveness. The gaslighting thing, that's so insidious that we might really get confused about what's real and what's not real. And so, get some outside help. And please don't, if you're in a relationship where you're feeling really bad about yourself, get some support and make sure you're not being mistreated, because nobody deserves that.
Now, I'm wondering now that, we joked about the election earlier, but given the U.S.'s divides that are no longer simply like, we're Democrats, you're Republicans, we disagree, but have really become like vitriolic, like talk about deal breakers. Are you seeing that in your practice?
I am. Ooh, yes. Not easy. When people can't agree on the truth, whatever their truth is, it's like there's no more gravity. It's scary. It's very disturbing. So I think you have to find a relationship with someone where you can make clear agreements, and you can stand by what you say, and you can keep your agreements, and there's transparency and honesty and integrity. And oh my gosh, that's just the foundation we have to have to be able to trust and feel secure. I used the word secure functioning before, but I mean secure and safe just in our lives. It's all the same thing, which is really about honesty and integrity and trust, and knowing that people care about us. It's really important.
Right. But in the outside world, like, we don't know what the truth is, right? Like, we have to trust people, right? Like, I don't exactly know how the virus responds to a vaccine. Like, I have to, right? So for couples who are finding themselves on opposite sides of the truth divide and operating out of separate realities, do you find, like, is that the deal breaker, or does it also infect the relationship itself? Like, I wasn't criticizing, you're too sensitive. Like even that is like up, a question of truth, right?
Right. If my partner's hurt and I'm in a 2-person system, my job is to give them relief right away. Yeah. So you can use those words about being too critical or too sensitive, but to be a two-person system is to make sure that your partner lands, right side up. And I think there have to be agreements. So yeah, I'm working with some couples recently with different politics and maybe mask or anti-masker, but they have to come to reality to say, how are we going to keep each other safe? Literally, what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? And come up with agreements. And they have to do that. So we get extremely explicit. Like, it's not this abstract stuff. It's, what am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? And we're going to keep our word.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Boy, it sounds like we could use a national therapist for that. Like, when you say, like, what am I willing to do to keep you safe? Like I think that's not a way that this whole mask thing or the vaccine thing has been framed, right? It's been framed in terms of my freedom to do whatever I want, versus guilting people who aren't, as opposed to saying, this is a relationship.
Right.
Like, it's interesting how the work you do is kind of the basic Lego piece for the entire world the social world we're living in.
Yeah. Yes, because the foundation is safety and trust. And how can we live in this world when we don't have a sense that people are sensitive and fair? Like, that gives us everything we need to just keep being in relationship. When we don't have that, then we're constantly in this stress response of fight or flight or freeze. And it's terrible for our health. We're in hyper arousal. We're scanning to see if we're going to get, attacked or killed or shamed. It's terrible for our health. It really is. So,
right. And I guess scanning from that place, we miss the kind offers. Right, because they're not. We're just looking for danger to avoid, as opposed to, I think I'm trying to remember. I don't remember exactly the language, but sort of like kind offers. Like, what's that? What am I thinking of here?
So John
bids?
Gottman.
Is it bids?
Yeah, John Gottman talks about bids for attention,
okay.
And some other clinicians talk about having soft eyes, and that really our social engagement system is in eye to eye and in our tone of voice and being in that place of social engagement where there's safety and security. And the bids for attention mean that if your partner, that you're attuned, that you're not going to miss something because you're up close and personal, being able to see that.
Gotcha. So I'm going to give you one more marriage template, which is a couple that's not going to get divorced. And they're not going to get divorced because they're playing it safe. So they're not really getting their needs met. They're not optimally happy. There's these simmering fights that they've decided to stop fighting. But, and things are fine, in air quotes. But they're sort of running out the clock. And someone's listening and says, boy, I want more than that. Yeah. What are the steps?
The steps are, I think, really it takes an act of courage to say to your partner, like, I think we can have more than this. I want to be able to dream with you. I want to be able to build with you. Life's too short. Come hold my hand. You want to do this together, and perhaps get like some really good material about couples work. Like Stan Tatkin writes Wired for Love. John Gottman writes 7 Principles to Make Marriage Work, I think is the name of his. Go to a couples therapist. You can get some really good couples counseling. Go 5 to 6 sessions. It's not a lifetime where you have to go every week for years and years. It's probably costs the price of a new refrigerator. I'm not sure. I'd have to do the math, but
depends if it has the filter for the ice tray, right?
That's true. But you might be pleasantly surprised to hear your partner say, "Oh, I thought maybe you didn't care. This is great. Let's work on things together. Let's let's build our sex life. Let's develop some dreams. Let's have a mission statement for our marriage. Let's have a 2.0, like after the first marriage. Let's have our own upgrade. And I think people need to do that. Like if we're not growing, we're dying. So I think every couple really needs to be thinking about how to nurture their relationship, how to invest, how to spice things up, how to look at each other and go, how are we doing? It's so important. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, great. Yeah, because, in the behavioral and the lifestyle medicine world, we talk about, nutrition and sleep and exercise and stress and social support, but we don't really talk explicitly about relationship and like the erotic parts of the relationship. There's very little talk about how's your sex life, about how's your intimacy with another human being. And I think it's there's prudish reasons for it and lack of training reasons for it, but I think we're seeing that loneliness, whether it's physical or psychological, is a bigger killer than cholesterol.
Yeah. Yeah. And having somebody to have sex with, having somebody to laugh with, having somebody to check to see if you have moles on your back. Like we're like monkeys too. We need to groom each other. So like we need other people in our lives. We're wired to bond like that.
Right. Very good.
I appreciate you bringing that up. That's your thing. And Howie, I'm so glad that you invited me today. It's been fun.
Yeah, I hope this is useful for folks who are thinking about the stuff I'm thinking about, because it's not a topic that we've really brought into. Like, it's amazing me these days how many things are important that I haven't thought about. Like 2 weeks ago, I had someone on the podcast talking about houseplants. And I'm like, oh, this is a Plant Yourself podcast. I never thought about houseplants. And now, thinking about like relational social health, and really not really ever talking about, love, sex, intimacy, recovery in a marriage. This is such crucial stuff. So can you work with couples outside of North Carolina, or is it like if someone's like really wants to find out more about what you do and maybe work with you, who gets to?
Who gets to? So I'm licensed in North Carolina, so I can only work in North Carolina, but they are changing the laws as of next year where there's a certain states where it's going to be reciprocal. I think there might be 12 or 13 states. So if you're in one of those states, I'll be able to work with you. And in the meantime, I have a free e-course. If you go to my website, afterthefirstmarriage.com, that has some ideas. I have blogs, I have my podcast, and if individuals want to contact me, if I can't work with them, I can help them find some good resources. So I want to be able to support anybody who's listening today.
Awesome. So it's afterthefirstmarriage.com, and they can find the podcast and the free e-course and everything else from there.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, Sue, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and it's especially a pleasure to talk to you professionally, because we rarely do. So it's kind of like, oh, so that's what she's up to.
That's true. Yeah.
So maybe we'll go for a socially distanced hike one of these days.
Anytime, all the time. That's keeping me sick. We didn't talk about nature, but you talked about plants, and oh my gosh, I love these days. I love getting outside. So yeah, go for a walk.
Thank you. Talk to you later. All right. Hope you found that useful. If you want more about Dr. Orenstein or some of the books that we mentioned, you can find all that in the show notes at plantyourself.com/445. So what do we got going on? In running news, I stopped running to really focus on yoga and what's called BASE, B-A-A-S-E, which stands for a bunch of things: alignment, extension, stability. I'm not sure. It's through the Monkey Bar Gym of Madison, Wisconsin, which is now the Monkey Bar Gym of the internet, since they are virtual only. And my old pals, John and Jesse Hines, have been kicking my ass, teaching me how to get back into alignment, how to move with precision and power and strength, and it's been great. But I also ran this morning 4 miles yesterday, so I'm starting to reintegrate, feeling much better in the running now that I'm really working on muscles and alignment and core and all that other good stuff. Garden news, had a smoothie yesterday with garden greens. The ground is really, really soggy, so you need kind of your hip waders to get in there and harvest. And Mia and I took a walk on the tobacco trail over the weekend and harvested what may be turkey tail mushrooms, or maybe death. We're not sure yet. And some usnea, which is, I guess, some kind of saprophytic sort of licheny, ferny thing that grows on tree branches that she turns into medicine. All right, time for thanks. Thanks to Will Ridenauer for allowing me to use his beautiful song Sabali Dawn, The Dance of Peace. You can find more of Will's music at his website, willridenauer.com. And of course, thanks to all of you Plant Yourself podcast patrons. Kim Harrison, Lynn McClellan, Brittany Porter, Dominic Maurer, Barbara Whitney, Tammy Black, Amy Good, Amanda Hatherley, Mary Jane Wheeler, Ellen Kennelly, Melissa Cobb, Rachel Behrens, Tina Scharf, Tina Ahern, Jen Filikanovsky, David Bizek, The Mysterious Michelle X, Elsbeth Feldman, Leah Stoller, Alan Christensen, Colleen Peck, Michelle Landry, Josina, Sarah Durkis, Kelly Cameron, Janet Selby, Claire Adams, Tom Franzek, Jeanette Bennett, Gila Sert, David Donahue, Blair Cyber, Dorona Vizov, Gio and Carolyn Argentati, Jody Friesner, Misha Rosen, Michael Warbeck, Aviva Lael, Alicia Lemus, Val Linneman, Nick Harper, Bandana Chawley, Molly Levine, The Inscrutable Harry R., Susan Laverty, The Panda Vegan, Craig Kovic, Adam Scharf, Karen Burry, Heather Morgan, Nigel Davies, Marion Blum, Teresa Koppel, Julian Watkins, Breed O'Connell, Sharon Hirschman, Linda Ayat, Holm Hedegaard, Isa Tuzinwa, Connie Hainline, Aaron Greer, Alicia Davis, Heather O'Connor, Carolyn Jensen, Sherry Olakoski of Plant Powered for Health, Karen Smith, Scott Morani, Karen and Joe Crabtree, Kirby Burton, Teresa Carell, Kevin McCauley, Elizabeth Rothschild, Ann Jesse, Cheryl Dwyer, Jenny Hazelton, Peter W. Evans, Dennis Bird, Darby Kelly, Laurie Fanny, Linnea Lundquist, Emily Iconelli, Levy Wallach, Rosamund McAtee, Dan Picorni, Stephen Leenan, Patty DiMartino, Mike and Donna Kartz, Deanne Bishop, Bilberry Elf, Marjorie Lewis, Tricia Adams, Nancy Sheldon, Lindsay Bayshore, Gunmarie Hagan, Tracy Gullidge, Laura Heaton, Meg from Mama Says, Stacey Stokes, Ben Savage, Michael Kay, David Hughes, Connie Rogers, Claire England, Sally Robertson, Paranganchi, Amy Daly, Brian Tourville, Mark Jeffrey Johnson, Josie Dempsey, Karen Schmidt, Pamela Hayden, Emily Perryman, Allison Corbett, Richard Stone, Lauren Vaught of Edible Musings, Aaron Hasty, Sean Owen, Sagar Naik, Erica Piedra, Danielle Roberts, Michael Lushton, Sarah Johnson, Catherine Floyd, for your generous support of the podcast. That's it for now. As always, be well, my friends.